Hello, I want to welcome all of you from near and far who have come here to celebrate Dan. I had to wait a long time after Dan died, almost a year and a half, for a service in person to be possible. It felt important to be physically present so we could truly be together. Of course, needing to wear masks in spite of everyone being vaccinated is a big disappointment we weren't expecting. We've arranged the chairs so there's some separation between them. The tables in the back are a place so you can put your food there and move around easily during the reception. This beautiful room is spacious with open windows, as you can see on both sides. The doors are also open, this one and the one in the back. I hope that makes you feel more comfortable physically and mentally. Many who love Dan are not able to be here. A video of the service will be available soon on Dan's website. I wanted to thank the people most involved in making Dan's memorial happen. My son Steve worked with me on thinking through and designing this celebration. His wife Meg has been indispensable with the technical aspects, especially the screen portion. I'm grateful to our videographer, Jeff Schlags, an experienced documentary filmmaker. Our good friend Christian Malvi was responsible for putting together the music. I'll quickly go through the program in front of you. The first part will begin with Dan's sister, Ellie Bulliver, then her son Peter Bulliver will speak, followed by Joanne Wile, and then Phil Carroll, Dan's close friend and colleague. The second part of the program will be on screen from the stage, and we'll be closing most of the drapes and the door for that part only. The screen portion will take about 25 minutes, just so you know what to expect. Windows will stay open, and we'll watch a tape of the government's tribute to Dan, followed by a captioned slideshow of photos of Dan, which are also on display, some of you saw them, and then a live video of Dan doing the presentation. I'll begin the third part, the next group of 4 speakers. Then Steve will speak, followed by Evie Talmas. There you go. Good, there you are. From Dan's Oakland training program. And finally, Kevin Russell, Dan's co-leader of the Santa Rosa group. If you wish to leave your own tribute to Dan, you can do so on his website. The formal part of the ceremony will be followed by a reception. You'll have a chance to connect with other attendees and partake of food and drink buffet style. We'll also be offering books and DVDs by Dan for you to take with you. I want to say how meaningful it is for me to have so many of you who love Dan gathered here to be together and celebrate his life. Ellie, we'll begin with you.
I'm Danny's sister, and I'm not supposed to be standing up here. This is Danny's role. He was the one in the family who could synthesize our thoughts and memories. He was the one who spoke for us at birthdays, weddings, anniversaries, and funerals. He was the one who could characterize a relationship in a paragraph. Our parents were living in Chicago in 1938 when Danny was born, and when I arrived 19 months later. Shortly thereafter, World War II began. We moved to the Boston area for our father to work in the war effort. We relocated to Long Island when his work took him to Brooklyn. We lived in Woodmere for the next 10 or so years until each of us went to college. Danny went to the University of Chicago for a BA in psychology and then to Berkeley for his PhD. I followed him to Berkeley a year later for an MSW. Dan spent the rest of his life in the Bay Area. As his sister, I benefited from Danny's generous character. For me, he was a great teacher. He taught me to climb out of my crib. From then on, he was my guide, my pioneer, my friend. 1 year ahead of me in school, he helped me with Latin translations and math. When I was sick, which was frequent, he stopped on his way home from school to buy me candy and comic books. Since both our parents worked, he was the one at home when we came home from school. So he was the one to whom I poured out my social miseries. When we shared a turkey wishbone at Thanksgiving, he wished that our almost deaf mother would get her hearing back, while I wished for a new bike, doll, whatever. He taught me how to drive. Our cousin Jessie, one of twins, recalls Danny as the inventor of memorable games, such as filling socks with flour and throwing them at each other. His love of music was nurtured by our father. An aspiring athlete, wiry but short, he threw a baseball for hours at a gong hung in the backyard, and similarly spent other hours shooting baskets. The best payoff he got for all of those hours was to be named assistant manager of the high school varsity basketball team. There were indications and influences in Danny's growing up years that presaged his future professional life. Our mother was a psychiatrist, though luckily we had passed our formative years before her residency. At home, there was a way of talking about people that was always empathic. We attended a camp for teenagers run by a psychologist where thoughtful discussions were everyday fodder. In high school, Dan began writing daily. No one knew what he was writing about. My mother worried about his not being social and wanted him to go out and hang out with friends. Ultimately, from camp on, he always had loyal and devoted friends, and he was equally loyal and devoted, as some of you probably know. As for the writing, he never stopped until his heart gave out. His early professional writing showed him struggling to be non-pejorative, non-defensive, and non-accusatory. Those were problems he found in popular therapies. Probably the great books curriculum at the University of Chicago enhanced his skill in listening to feelings and enabled him to articulate them, often poetically. Though he spent his adult life in California and the rest of the family lived on the East Coast, he remained very involved with us. When our dad was sick, Dan flew in every month or so. When Mom was alone, he called her every day. He let me debrief after my Friday lunches with our mother after she moved to Philadelphia. He scheduled workshops nearby so that we could attend and have a visit. At times, he was able to incorporate us into his presentations. Our mom was a star. Although Dan loved maps and architecture, he didn't like to travel. When he finally joined us on a trip to Italy, he often begged off tourist adventures to spend time with his laptop. This changed when Dan began giving workshops over many seas. I'd like to share some examples of how he used his skills and heart as MC at birthdays, memorials, and others. Perhaps you know how he was able to make you feel special, to listen, to have you feel heard. That comes through in these quotes, but often with delicious humor. First are 2 stanzas from a poem he wrote to me on my 50th birthday. Who would have known when we ran around the table driving our parents crazy that we'd each have our own house and that we'd each have our own table, and you'd have your own kids running around the table driving you crazy. And the last stanza, but of course one thing we did know as we ran around the table driving our parents crazy, that even if you were to live in Philadelphia, and even if I were to live in California, no matter this, no matter that, no matter anything, I'd always be able to count on you, and you'd always be able to count on me. Here's an extract from comments by Dan at our mom's 75th birthday. I've known Marge a long time. Of course, Marge isn't her real name. Her real name is Mom, but Ellie's the only other person here who seems to know that. Anyway, I've known Mom Marge for a long time, for 2/3 of her life and slightly more than all of mine. So I know something about her. Well, actually, I don't know much about her, and that's because when you're a kid, you just assume that the way your mother and father are is the way everyone's mother and father are, and the way everyone is. So it took a long time to discover that all people aren't as warm as Mom Marge is, and that not all people can reach out to others the way she can. Even these days, when I'm 3,000 miles away, when I pick up the phone to talk with her, I know I'm going to get caught up in Mom's engaging warmth. And I found out also that other people aren't as charming as she is. She draws people to her wherever she goes. She's been a model I've tried to follow. Every once in a while, I have a charming minute. And I consider that a Mom moment. I'm being like Mom. I'm being for a few minutes, but Mom can be all the time. And here are some of the thoughts. This is the last one, sent to the recent memorial for his closest friend of 65 years. Dan was too ill at that point to attend in person. This is what he sent, and I guess I read it for him. One of the ways Peter brought enchantment to things is by making comments that seem on the surface unfriendly, but powerfully expressed affection. After having dinner with him one evening, I met with him again the next morning. He greeted me at the door with, "What, you again?" His delicious way of saying how glad he was to see me. At the moment, I'm struggling with my own catastrophic worsening of heart problems, which is why I'm not here today. Throughout our lives, Peter and I kept finding ways to be together. And now we are doing this together. Soon I'll be joining him, and I know the first thing he'll say, "What, you again?" And so I must say goodbye to this gentle soul, this beautiful, wise man, my brother. But as he said when our mother died, I won't miss him, as he will always be with me. And now it's important for me to hear how you celebrate his life.
Okay. Hi, I am Dan's nephew, and I think you may see family resemblance there. I am Peter Daniel Bulova, and he, when I was little, would call me P. Daniel. I have two of my daughters here. I have Julia's over here, Megan is over here. My wife, Katie, and daughter Vivian are not here, but they're here in spirit. I am an internal medicine physician in Pittsburgh, and I talked with Dan about medical issues as they arose, trying to help when he had issues, various heart issues along the way. And he always, somehow I've come out of those conversations feeling better about myself. He would say something like, you just know the exact right thing to say. And I kind of feel like he was projecting a little bit, because Dan was the one who always seemed to know the exact right thing to say. Things then changed, and we really had a role reversal about 4 years ago when I found out that I needed open heart surgery too. So he was the one who was the expert to help kind of talk me through that. So he was my sounding board, and I will always be thankful for him to have that role. Dan's biggest impact on our nuclear family was in 2009. He was the officiant, the ringleader, the master of ceremonies of my wedding, and it's up there, top left. He married us with gentle words, Katie and I, and then folded the four Bulovas from Pittsburgh together into a new family. 2 years ago, he became the unexpected pen pal of my daughter Vivian, and they would write about Shakespeare and other heady topics as kindred literature aficionados. It was a connection that Vivian will look back on for her whole life, and I'm grateful that he made time to do that for her. Dan has a few gifts that I have been able to reflect upon over these past year and a half, and some lessons that I'll carry with me. So I'll give you the things that I think of when I think of Dan. Dan did not do things halfway. When he took up biking, it was 60-mile trips. Jogging would turn into marathon running. When he decided to lower his cholesterol with diet, he became so regimented. I think that his cholesterol went into the negative numbers, if that's possible. I don't think it is, but if anyone could do it, it would have been Dan. One summer in Washington, D.C., when I was about 10, he asked if I wanted to go jogging. As the super energetic kid, I figured that this adult who must have been well over 30, he couldn't keep up with me. But little did I know that was during his marathon running phase. So we were running along Riverview Parkway on a beautiful day. And he asked, "How far do you think you could run at this pace?" And I said, 6 miles, which for me seemed like forever. And he replied, "You know, I think I could just about do this all day." And there was something about that tiny moment that has stuck with me for all these years. I think it's because he was truly living in that moment and really enjoying it and letting all the other things in life just disappear for that time. And I'm hoping to carry that along with me and pass that along. And I think we only went about 1 mile because I couldn't run any more than that. But he made me think it was 6. Another gift that Dan possessed, I'm sure that everyone in this room can appreciate, and it stems from his ability to listen. His talent was most apparent for me that when I was talking with him, he made me feel like I was the most important person in the room. That what I was saying was valid and was important. And it's amazing how powerful that can be. And I hope to emulate that respect that he has for everyone. And I'm sure he was able to do that with so many people in this room too. Just really, really make you feel special. In my job, especially more recently, I've been doing a lot more palliative care than I wish I had to. And I feel that Dan in his last months was a pretty amazing role model for how much he appreciated the time that he had. And I can use his example when I have patients that are in a similar situation. Not everyone will be able to write a book, but I hope that they can live in the moment and appreciate every moment the way Dan could. When my grandfather, Howie, died, a little over 20 years, more than 20 years ago, we had a memorial service, and Dan was, as my mom said, he was the ringleader, the master of ceremonies for that. And when anyone felt that they had talked too long at that memorial service, or they said something that had already been said, or they felt uncomfortable, Dan would say, "That was perfect." Or, "Someone may have said that before, but we want to hear it from you." What they were about to say was just what should be said at that moment. And he was right, and I hope that everyone here feels that way today.
Dan has been my best friend for over half of a century, and 30 plus of those years were when we were married, and the other 20, we would talk on the phone every day, or we would have walks, frequent visits where we would catch each other up on each other's lives. And my friends would often say to me, "Does Dan like to do anything besides write?" And actually he did love many things. He loved taking our dog Joshie to Redwood Regional Park, and Joshie would have all these smells that he was interested in, and Dan would listen to tapes by Noam Chomsky. And he also loved comedy records, Mike Nichols, Elaine May, Bill Cosby. His favorite TV show was West Wing, and he loved the musical Fiddler on the Roof. That was his favorite musical. And Dan really looked forward to our birthdays, because that's when we would actually get to have pizza, and that would be followed by a chaser of Diet Dr. Pepper. But his true love, really, well, I have to admit, was writing. And every morning, Dan would wake up he would put on his blue terry cloth bathrobe and sit in front of his typewriter, or later his electric typewriter, later his word processor, and go over what he'd written the previous day and see what needed to be changed. And during our 30 years together, he actually wrote 3 books and over 30 chapters and journal articles in psychiatric journals. And so Dan didn't really need a deadline to write. He just loved putting his ideas on paper and reviewing them and seeing how he could improve upon them. After letting you know a little bit about the writing, I'd say that what was really special about Dan was his kindness. And we had a worker who was coming to our house to do a number of repairs, plumbing, other things, carpentry. And this man was going through a difficult divorce. And so Dan actually was calling him every single morning to help this man get out of bed and come to work. And then finally, this gentleman was able to get to work on his own, go to other jobs in the Bay Area, and didn't need that launching from Dan, but it really made a difference for such a long period of time in his life. And then when Dan's cardiology team gave him a year to live, Dan called me up and asked if I would help to declutter the house so that Dorothy would have less to do after he died. So Dorothy and Dan and I went through books, papers, electronic gear, and finally we were able to make, as Dorothy knows, a tiny dent in all the clutter that was left in the house. And there's still plenty to do, as she knows. And as I was preparing for this talk, I was looking through the Sunday New York Times, and there was an article that stood out to me because I thought it really was about Dan. And the name of the article was, "Where Did the Dead Go in Our Imaginations?" And this is what the article said. "So this is where the dead go in our imaginations. They continue to live with us in the moments when we are sad and terrified. They cheer for us. They give us unbelievable strength and the courage we lack to carry on in situations. They coax us through. They lead us where we need to be to experience the joy and capability that was them. They who have been with us in life managed to teach us how and where in death we can listen to them and find their voices and essence again. So thank you, Dan, for all those years."
I'm Phil Cowan, and a friend and colleague of Dan. Dan and I had lunch once a month for more than 35 years, and I'll come back to that in a few minutes. I actually met him earlier, 58 years ago, in 1963, when I was a brand new faculty member in Berkeley's psychology department, and he was in the middle of his doctoral program in clinical psychology. I don't think we had that much contact until I read his first book about different theories of therapy, which I really loved. It was written after he graduated. And then we started talking. I attended one of his workshops to get my continuing education credit as a clinical psychologist. You know, some gurus in the therapy field dominate presentations with their certainty and their outsized personalities. And as you know, that wasn't Dan. There he was at the head of a U-shaped table all day long, showing his self-deprecating humor, putting on skits in which he played a puzzled therapist, admitting what all therapists think but never say, "I don't know what the hell is going on here. And I'm afraid that clients are going to find me out." There were two original principles that became typical of his approach. First, that people always don't feel entitled to the feelings that they feel, so that when they feel negative feelings and express them to a partner, trouble starts. So he started what John Gottman called, I don't know whether John will refer to this, as doing the Dan Wile, by talking first for one partner, checking out whether he had that right, then talking for the other. What he was starting was a way of collaborative communication, collaborative conversation. In the early 2000s, Carolyn and I, with our colleague Bob Levinson, who's here, taught a year-long course that Bob actually thought of in couples therapy in Berkeley's clinical program. It involved reading the literature, recruiting couples as clients, doing therapy, and evaluating the work. That is, it was a way of integrating all the parts of clinical work, the scholarship, the therapy, and the evaluation research. When Bob went on sabbatical, Dan joined us, and it was really a joy to get his perspective, his wise comments, and it helped us, Carolyn and I, to reframe some of the basic issues in couples communication and in what leads to change. With attribution, we began to use many of his basic ideas as we supervise students and as we train group leaders in our own approach to couples group interventions with parents of young children in many countries. Carolyn and I also spent time as a couple with Joanne and Dan, and later with Dorothy and Dan. And in the last few years, we spent long dinners with Dorothy and Dan in discussions both personal and professional, sharing dilemmas of work, of family, and of growing older. Dan's two later books titles contained a basic idea that was totally surprising to me personally as somebody who tries to avoid conflict at all costs. The titles are After the Fight, Using Your Disagreements to Build a Stronger Relationship, and After the Honeymoon, How Couple Conflict can improve your relationship. Really? But it was true. Dan was in demand for workshops all over the country. For each one, he would prepare a new and improved version of the workshop. He didn't just recycle all the old stuff and do it again. Each time, he would work on a new angle, a new version, dropping stuff that didn't work, adding other stuff. Finally, back to the lunches. As already been mentioned, as far as I could tell, for Dan, a day without writing was a lost day. He reminded me a little bit of Van Tyler's Accidental Tourist, if you know that book. He's a man who was happiest at home, resisted travel, and in the book, when forced to travel in foreign lands, stayed in holiday inns. Now, I don't think Dan actually did that, but you get the point here. We always had lunch at the same place on Shattuck Avenue, which was first called the No Name Restaurant, then the Yellow House, and now called the Node. And at our lunches, Dan always ordered the same thing, a salad, and this was for tuna, always the same. We talked about the world of politics, which was increasingly a downer. We talked about couple relationships and about our own relationships. In the last few years, he was very explicit about how happy he was in his relationship with Dorothy. And after we were served our coffee, Dan would always pull out freshly written pages from his backpack, hand me a pen, ask for comments, and then we would talk about the comments, and it often led to a discussion of important therapy principles. And because he did that, and because I was doing him a favor, he always paid for the lunch. It was really wonderful. And in the rush before he died, that was finished only afterwards, he produced a powerful new book with Dorothy that presented a manual for therapists with explicit examples of how they could implement the collaborative therapy approach, and it's on the table there. Dan was a dear, supportive, loyal friend. Other people have used the word loyal, and it's very true of him. He was a quiet person with a powerful impact on his friends, on the many couples he worked with, and on the field of couples therapy. He's going to be missed by all of us here and by many who are not here. And I will especially miss the warmth, the personal and intellectual exchanges we had, and our once-a-month lunches.
Well, friends, It's a sad moment for us to be gathered here to recognize the contributions of our dear friend, Dr. Dan Wile. Among all the therapists that we've met and read, Dan is unique in having presciently anticipated a lot of the findings that Bob Levinson and I discovered painstakingly through research. Bob and I discovered, for example, that most problems couples have are perpetual. They never get solved. And the emphasis on conflict resolution is misplaced. We should look at conflict management. Dan knew that already in his book After the Honeymoon. And his Solving the Moment book really recognizes that and helps couples get to a place where they can accept one another and dialogue together. And that's just one of the things that Dan really anticipated that came out of research. So Dan was really unique, and he taught all of our therapists how to work in the moment to deal with the fallback positions of attack or withdrawal. Attack where you make your partner your enemy, and withdrawal where you make your partner a stranger. And so we really miss Dan. We learned an enormous amount from him. And we're so happy that Dorothy Kaufman was able to finish that final book, Solving the Moment. And we wish we could be there with you all to pay a tribute to Dan, our dear friend.
Dan was a magnificent human being in his own very quiet, caring, and kind way. I think really compassion and kindness were his watchwords. He never aggrandized himself, quite the opposite. In fact, he never gave himself, I think, enough credit for his brilliance and his profound intuition about what touched his clients and moved them into a new realm of connection. The other thing that we really saw with Dan is that he was a fabulous, generous teacher. He offered to give to our clinicians at the Gottman Institute a wealth of knowledge, shared freely, only because he wanted more people to be able to help as best they could. And his concern was both for his couples and our couples, but also for the clinician, so that the clinician could be helped to become more effective and self-empowering. Dan was also a poet. When he doubled for his clients, the way that he expressed himself was so true to what the clients were feeling, but more profoundly stated with poetic terms, with simplicity that really touched the heart of the listening partner in the couples he worked with. I guess the other thing that I am kind of bittersweetly happy for is that Dan found Dorothy after a life of loneliness, I would say. He and Dorothy were the perfect match. They both embodied sweetness and care and love for each other, honesty and affection and integrity, both of them. And Dorothy, we really cherish you and the fact that you entered Dan's life and gave him love and tenderness, which all of us need, as well as his needing it. So our hearts and our prayers are with you all, and those of you who love Dan, we hope that your journey of grieving will be a gentle and tender one. Thank you.
All right, so the way this goes, there's the big problem in couple therapy, in relationships, is fighting and withdrawing. That's a simple way to put it. And when people come, they come for a variety of reasons, of content reasons, but the underlying one, and the one that we can help them with, is fighting and withdrawing. Because The problem is that we can help them with is not the specific thing they come in about, but how they talk or don't talk about it. So they get into fights, or because they get into fights, they don't talk about it at all. So we arrange a way for them to talk about it. What therapy is, if you think of it that way, is that people in a problematic situation are in need of a conversation. It's a conversation of reconnection if they're withdrawn, and it's a conversation of resolution if they've been fighting. If you look at just in a simple way at what we really do, I think you can go very far with this way of thinking about it. Now, to be dramatic, I talk about what I want to do in a couple therapy session is to solve the moment rather than solve the problem. And by that I mean I'm trying to get them to have the needed conversation. Trying to help. Now, a phrase I like to use is since if I'm trying to get a conversation going, which means I'm trying to get if they're withdrawn, engaged, or if they're fighting, to get a gentle interaction going, a loving interaction going. The way to start a conversation is to get somebody to say something kind of warm and conciliatory. And the way I like to talk about that is intimacy may be just a sentence away. I used to say intimacy is always just a sentence away because it's more dramatic and fun, but my wife pointed out to me I can't get away with that. So I've got a may in it, maybe somewhere. Of course, a fight is always a sentence away also, but they're already doing that. All right, now oh yes, and so the problem then is, well, how come they're not coming up with the sentence and the conversation in the first place? Well, there's a lot of reasons, such as when you're in a fight, you become a you statement generating machine. There's no way to say anything, warm and stuff. But a way I like to talk about it is loss of voice. That is, ideally, at any point, there'd be a way in which you can get the vulnerable feeling underlying what's of concern to you, what's alive for you at the moment. That's Marshall Rosenberg's wonderful phrase. That if you were to say it, is likely to have a better effect on your partner. A lot of exceptions, but likely to have a better effect and can start, a warm exchange where, there's I like to think of 3 cycles, self-reinforcing cycles that partners can get into. One is the obvious adversarial one. You say something angry, you turn your partner into an enemy, and says something angry or defensive in return, and there you are. You know about those. A similar kind of thing, though not quite as dramatic, occurs in a withdrawn cycle, where if you say something kind of cautious and hesitant, it can be kind of contagious, and your partner can pick that up. And it's one of those dull evenings where not much is happening, and you just turn on the TV. The third is a collaborative cycle, an intimate cycle, where you say something warm and engaging, and it kind of melts your partner, and they can't help but say something warm and engaging in return, and that's self-reinforcing also. All right, so that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to find that sentence that gets one of these self-reinforcing positive cycles going. Now, there's a lot of ways of doing it, but a way I love to do it, in a way, if you think about it, it's kind of a natural, is step in and say it for them. And I've gotten to a point where which is doubling, where I go over and I kneel next to them and say it for them. And if they just said something angry, I will translate it the best I can into something that isn't angry. Now, I'm hoping that'll warm the other person and they'll respond in kind, but they may not. You know, it can be too little too late. So I go over and reshape what they just said also. I can go back and forth doing that. And that's what I'm going to try to demonstrate, how I do that. The principles for doubling, now what do I do when I go over and reshape? Well, in a way, some of them are the obvious things you'd think of doing. One is I change the tone from a angry statement to a warm statement, or a detached statement to an engaged one. A second thing is I would change you statements to I statements. Now there's a little simple thing I think of lots of times that really kind of helps you figure out the I statement, even though it doesn't collect, it's not all of them. It's whenever a partner makes a complaint, how can you turn that into a wish or a fear? And it turns out to be not so hard to do when you have that in mind. If you've got everything in mind, I got to go back to childhood, I got to do this, I got to. But if you're just looking, well, no, that's a. What can I do with this thing that's just said to turn it into a warm, engaging conversation? Well, if it was a complaint, and that's what it often is in a fight, well, now how can I make that a wish? Change the tone or fear. The third is, so it's a tone of voice, I statements, and acknowledgments in place of the partner's accusation. That's a term that my wife Dorothy pointed out is kind of a key underlying idea of the whole approach. So when people are in a fight, it's a debate, and they just make their case the best way they can, and they fight off the other person's case. I mean, no one's listening. But if you want to interrupt that and change it right away into a conversation, well, besides the tone and the I statements, that'll do it too, is instead of making your case, you start out with, you're right that, or you've got a good point that, or actually, even if the person, the partner you're speaking for is really against everything the other one says, just a bit of active listening is already something, because I mean that's the magic of Carl Rogers. People don't feel listened to, and something really gets them if they, oh yeah, that's right, that's what I said. See? So if you start speaking for one partner, and you have that partner who just made an accusation, say, well, okay, I hear what you're saying. You're telling me such and such and such and such. Well, that already warms the other person who's been heard just in terms of what they've said. Other things I do, and there's a little danger here of getting too specific in a general kind of talk, not to mention the fact I was told you could only tell the audience 3 things. And I think I've said 4 or 5. I'll keep going. All right. So, but it's written down. Okay, it's written down. 2 other things I do when I go over and double for people is 2 ways I create a platform, a vantage point above the fray. So if a person who's really angry, I come over, and sometimes I can ignore the anger and just make the statement and make a nice statement. But sometimes I report it. I say, as you can see, I'm pretty angry. Well, that already changes the tone without ignoring that the anger has occurred. The other thing I do when I'm on this platform, it's a meta level, stepping back from a vantage point above the fray, is to talk about the couple pattern. So they're caught in pursuer distancer. I stand back and say, oh, we're caught in this horrible thing that we get into all the time, where I attack because you're withdrawn and you withdraw because I attack. What a shame this has to affect us the way it does. All right, so it's speaking for a partner and have them talk compassionately about their pattern. There's something a little bit nicer about stepping into the person's space, or at least into the person, being the person, because sometimes you just sort of sit back in your chair and you can double. That gives it more energy, and you can get away with more. You know, if you say, well, I guess what you're saying, if you make it a reflection, I guess what you're saying is such and such, it's a little distancing. But let me be you for a minute. For you, I'd say, people, most people take that better. An occasional person wants to have nothing to do with that. Yeah. All right, so let's see. I wanted to stop to make sure we had time for it. Okay, I'm still doing well. All right, then, if there's something you're going to get from me here, there's three possibilities. You could like the theory. You may be using your version of the theory yourself already. Then you're going to like it probably. Or you can like the method, and for your own theory, try doubling, or not that it's my method, it's Jacob Moreno's. And a third thing is there's a sensibility, a kind of view of the difficulty of doing couple therapy that you can get from me, which is not that you don't know it, to tell you the truth, which is the big countertransference problem in couple therapy is siding with one of the partners, or really siding against one of the partners. And it's amazing how subtle it can be at times and how unsubtle it is at other times. You know, sometimes you just kind of know you hate this person. You want the other person to get divorced. And you're just, what's he doing with this asshole? But other times it's a more subtle thing. You can think you're being neutral, and you're not quite. And one of the ways I could tell that is I do couple therapy these days a lot with my wife, who's also a therapist, just got her MFT at our age. Quite a chore that was. It's a chore at any age, but still. And so there I am doubling, and she's there too, being a co-therapist. And I think I've done this great job. One of the partners didn't really like what I said that much. And I'm thinking, this partner, what's wrong with this partner? Well, Dorothy will come in, and she'll make us a wonderful statement and can get behind this person better than I can, that I didn't even know that I wasn't doing. So there's ways you can be, in other words, to do this kind of therapy, what you want to do is to be able to get into each person's perspective and appreciate what they're struggling with, rather than stand back and judging them. And it's a hit or miss thing to do. With some people, it's easy to do. You just automatically warm up to them. Others, it's hard. And then there's this third type where you think you're doing it, but you're not quite. So we got to appreciate the imperfection of this profession stuff, so that and to be self-forgiving for it, and just be glad when you discover that you've been a little one-sided and you didn't even know it. To appreciate that you found it out, so you can begin to correct it. Is, I think, the stance I'd want to take and talk to you about.
I didn't know what this event would feel like for me in the moment, but I knew it would bring bittersweet comfort to speak right after the video you saw. It was made in 2017, just 3 years before Dan died. I love how alive he is, relaxed at home in his body and his words, enjoying himself and doing what he loves. The video reminded me of one of Dan's self-descriptions on Match.com. I'm an introvert who has extroverted moments. He doesn't say that here, but it's the beginning line in one of the many presentations he gave, followed by and I feel one coming on right now. And I think you certainly see that extroverted moment in the video. As many of you know, Dan and I met on Match.com. It was October 2007, and I had arrived here just a few months earlier from Massachusetts. I had decided to try living in the Bay Area, where I was a visiting professor at Mills College in the 1980s, and still had friends from that time. In contrast to many peers, I had not quite given up on meeting someone I could imagine growing old with. When I saw Dan's profile, I immediately liked this person. I quote, seeking a woman who shares my love for stimulating conversation, leftish political thinking, eye for the humor in things, and a reverent attitude toward life. I took the initiative and got in touch with him. It was the best and the luckiest decision of my life. In my own Match.com profile, I concluded by saying, finally, it's the mysterious fit between two people that makes a good relationship. I found that mysterious fit more deeply than I could have imagined with Dan. The 12 years we had together felt like coming home for the very first time. Meaning, as late in life as we did, we understood from the outset that we couldn't take each other for granted. It made our time together both comfortable and intensely present. I constantly rediscovered how Dan, the couple therapist, was one and the same as the man I loved. The same gentleness, compassion, wit, and reflex of empathy. I do mean reflex. If I was upset with something he said or did, which didn't happen often, his immediate response was not to argue, but to try to understand where I was coming from and put it in words, checking if he had it right. I think that's the true origin of Dan's doubling, his signature intervention in collaborative couple therapy. It came from an impulse within himself. I have a specific personal memory of Dan doubling that I'd like to share. It was during the last few months of his life. We didn't know that, but we knew his time was extremely limited. After a last emergency visit to UCSF in January 2020, Dan came home and needed to spend most of the day in bed. Steve arrived to stay with me for several days and give me support. At a certain point, we were both triggered by the stress of the situation. Dan, propped up on his hospital bed, could see we were upset. In spite of his weakened state, we somehow all three agreed that it would be helpful, it could be helpful, if Dan would double for us, which he proceeded to do for over a half hour. Alert and animated, Dan was at his best. He made it possible for both of us to step back and reframe our emotions so we could commiserate about the overwhelm we shared. For the three of us, the session was an extraordinary moment of happiness. Dan transformed my life, personally and professionally as well. Thanks to his enthusiastic belief in me, I embarked on my second career as a therapist, a new vocation I had briefly considered in my early 50s, but rejected. I decided I was too old. It wasn't easy being a beginning student after having been a tenured professor much of my adult life. I could not have made that choice and seen it through without the constant cheering of Dan at my side. We often saw couples together, and I learned so much from him. His confidence and his humility, a wonderful combination, made it fun to work together. Even now, especially when I work with couples, I often feel Dan's presence as if I'm channeling what he would say and do. We would consult after our sessions, and those are the moments, along with nighttime, when I miss him most terribly. He enjoyed giving credit to others, including me, as you saw in the video, an expression of his generosity that his colleagues and friends will recognize. The act of listening inherent in Dan's approach came naturally to him. Several years ago, beginning with an invitation to Esalen in Big Sur, we developed a weekend retreat, seeing a group of couples, often at our home in Oakland. We each contributed different parts. At one point, he decided to add a section he called Exploring the Reality of the Quieter Partner. He came up with 32 reasons why someone would tend to be quiet. It was a great success. The quieter person in the couple suddenly had much more to say than their more verbal partner. Dan's core identity, as many of you have alluded to, included being a writer. I define a writer as someone who has to write. Dan was a writer in that sense. He was a particularly fine writer, striving to get each sentence just right in clarity and rhythm. His need to write every morning was occasionally exasperating, but mostly a gift. Not only the gift he was given, but also a gift to me. He was a cheerful writer, which would have seemed an oxymoron before I knew him. When his writing went well, he felt good about it. And when it didn't, he looked forward to making it better the next day. I got the benefit of that upbeat perspective. His other writerly gift was the birthday present he gave me every year we were together, a witty, beautiful love poem. There's a Jewish saying when someone dies, may their memory be a blessing. For me, the intimacy we had of being seen and heard and understood is an extraordinary blessing. There will always be the sorrow of losing him and the joy of remembering who he was and who we were together. Thank you, Danny, and I thank all of you for being here today to honor him.
Hello, my name is Stephen McCall, and I am the son of Dorothy Kaufman and the stepson of Dan Wile. One of the things that I liked most about Danny was his sense of humor. And in my mind's eye, I can imagine asking Danny the question, is it okay if I include a little lightness and humor in my memorial service talk about you? And as usual, I'd imagine his words to be both supportive and encouraging, and he'd say, of course. So I thought I'd start by sharing, with my mom's permission, another part of the fun story about how my mom and Dan first met. At the relatively advanced age of 68, my mom made the very brave decision to completely uproot her life, move all the way across the country to the Bay Area, and start over. But within just 1 month, she found a promising profile on Match.com. The two had a pleasant email exchange, and then Danny said he had to go out of town for a couple of days, but he said he'd contact her right after he came back. But he didn't. After waiting 2 weeks, my mother sent him a strongly worded and somewhat angry message about not following through and not doing what he said he would do. She did not expect to hear from him ever again. Well, Danny was empathetic to my mother's feelings, but not only that, he was quite intrigued by the way she had so eloquently chastised him. And thus a romance was born. For me, the main takeaway of their wonderful How We Met story is that even if you're 68, you can start over, put up an ad on an internet dating site, and who knows, within maybe a month, you'll find the love of your life. For my mom and Dan, or Nani and Danny as my kids call them, it's felt right from the very beginning. As the years went by and things continued to go so well, I'd like to brag about them to my friends, and I'd say, they're the happiest couple I've ever seen in my whole life. Which was true. They had so little conflict, and they consistently took delight in each other's company. I was glad for Danny that he found my mom. I was glad for my mom that she found Danny. And it was always reassuring to know that these two smart and loving people were there to care for each other. Then, in early 2018, I got a call from my mom, who had an uncharacteristically giddy tone in her voice. "Guess what?" she said. "What?" I said. And she replied, "I'm getting married." And a bit later, they sent out a wedding invitation, and on it was written, "Now that we've turned 80 and lived together for 10 years, it's time to get married." And on October 28th of that year, I had the pleasure and the honor of presiding over their intimate ceremony, being the ringleader, master of ceremonies, as Peter would say, presiding over the intimate ceremony in their Oakland home. And as I gave my benediction to the bride and the groom, I said the following words: "I'd like to give thanks that these two have finally decided to make it official and stopped living in sin. And I'll just have to hope that they have enough maturity to know that they're not making a rash, impulsive decision based on youthfulness, naivete, and inexperience." But in all seriousness, when I think of these two, I think they make for a ridiculously good couple. They get along so well, it's shocking, it's almost outrageous. So as we gather to celebrate this marriage, I wholeheartedly give my blessing and say to my mom and Danny, to the way it's supposed to be. Well, after that wedding ceremony, the father-son relationship between Danny and me deepened and became more real. Maybe it's because it was now official and we were truly members of the same family. But then, in late 2019 and early 2020, as you all know, Danny's health took a severe turn for the worse, and I began spending more time up in Oakland giving support to both Danny and my mom. Those last few weeks were terribly painful, but I took some comfort in knowing how hard the three of us were trying, each in our own way. We were collaborating. We really made for a good team. It was during that time, more than ever, that we really felt like a little nuclear family, a mother and a father and a son, each of us trying to be loving and brave for one another. And through everything, Danny never stopped showing so much strength and grace and generosity, and yes, even lightness of spirit. My absolute favorite line of Danny's is when he paused in the hallway with his walker and looked back at my mother and me, and he said, "Aren't I lucky to go out in this glorious way?" So Danny, really my only complaint is that you didn't meet my mom sooner and stay around a while longer. Quite simply, it always felt good to be in your company. Even though we weren't related by blood, it sure seemed like we were. I sensed in you a kindred spirit. The qualities I saw in you are some of the same qualities I'd like to say I see in myself. I cherished and admired in you your kindness, your gentleness, your empathy and compassion, your capacity for insight and even-handedness. You were a wonderful father figure, and in many ways I'd love to emulate you, both personally and professionally. So Danny, thank you for being you, and I miss you, and we all do.
Thank you, Dorothy, for making this bittersweet occasion amazingly sweet. Thanks to your devotion to Danny and to all of us, and making sure that we had this opportunity to get closure, as we therapists like to say, and just be together. So, thank you. My name is Edie Talmas, and I am a member of a group. None of us play a musical instrument, none of us sing together, but we are known amongst ourselves as the Wilettes. And this is how we would email each other to carpool together. Who's going? Da-da-da-da, but it would always start with Dear Wilettes. And Jane Nolan Yen is here, just such a fabulous therapist. Donna Scott, are you here today? I don't think so. I know Elsa Rosenberg is on grandma duty. And we even have the newest member of this group, who actually I don't think knows that she's part of it. Her name is Carla Schlags, a super wonderful therapist in her own right. And we all understood that it had to be some major medical emergency or something catastrophic that would stop any of us from going to Dan Wile every month. And we did. We were devotees. It was many, many years that we spent going to Dan Wile monthly groups, like 17 or 18. So a little background, Jane and I used to attend all kinds of psychology seminars and workshops together. We were always trying to find a North Star that would help us in the uncertain and adversarial, often, world of couples therapy. We were at a training of John Gottman when the name Dan Wile was mentioned as being the best couples therapist that he knew. And as soon as I heard that, we stopped by the Stanford bookstore and I picked up the book that changed my life. This is not hyperbole, and it was called After the Fight. About 1/3 into reading it, I remember lying on my sofa, and I really could not contain my joy. Here was someone writing about the mind of the therapist, not just the minds of the couple sitting in front of us. And for those of us whose inner judge or critic or army sergeant, whatever you want to call it, was a nonstop, mean-spirited radio station, Dan's stance was a breath of fresh air. There were times when I'd be sitting across from a couple and I'd think, boy, they sure need a good therapist. So I had to work with him. I just had to work with him. So I flipped the book over and to my amazement found that he's in my backyard. He was in Oakland. I live in San Francisco. So I had flown across country to see Tom Petty, to see Bruce Springsteen, and here was this rock star in my own backyard. Okay, so I called Dan and asked in what way I might be able to work with him. And he explained all the possibilities. There's a monthly group, there's one-on-one consultation, there's books, there's newsletters, etc. So I opted for the book, since that was in just, I opted for the group since that was just in a few days. So the very next Friday, I really got it together. I'm usually by the skin of my teeth, but this time I got there 15 minutes early, and I knock on the door. Dan comes to the door in that blue bathrobe, tied around, and he's standing there, and it was like in that moment I realized, I'm here on the wrong day. And I was just horrified. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry. Now I just remembered, it's tomorrow, isn't it? And I was like all falling all over myself to apologize. And he just stood there and in his Danny way said, I really like your enthusiasm. All that, you could just hear Danny reframing a totally embarrassing moment, and shame just drifted away. And now about Dan, an undercover Buddhist. He came from love, compassion, and wisdom pretty much all of the time. There was no way he'd walk away from his monthly group and not feel really, really smart. Here are some things I treasured over the 17 or 18 years I attended. The Columbo inquisitive, thoughtful move. This is what Dan would do, right? Okay. Then we had the stance where he would lean in and he'd say, did you just come up with that? Again, you would just feel so brilliant. His enduring patience when others would drop into the group and want to put forth another theory. And I confess I did have a flirtation with EFT and Gottman. I swear I always came back to Dan. And then there were the times when one of us would present a really challenging case. He would listen seriously, he would pause, he would ponder, we'd all have bated breath, and he'd say, well, as I approach the waiting room, I'd be thinking, here goes nothing. Right? And again, like all the fear, the shame, I'm not a good enough therapist, drifted away. He never let himself become the only guru in the room. But there was a reason we returned month after month, year after year. He was brilliant. He was a brilliant writer. As Dorothy knows so well, he labored over every word, every sentence, every order of things. He was so meticulous. Thank goodness that Dorothy was able to finish the last piece of work Dan started. What a beautiful tribute to him, what a beautiful gift to him, and to all of us. In my nearly 30 years as a therapist, I learned lots of things to do. I learned lots of tools to use. I learned lots of things to say. From Dan, I learned all of that and more. I learned how to be a better therapist, how to be kinder to myself when I was working, how to turn down a self-assaulted radio station and help others to do that, how to be a better partner, a better friend, a better mom, a better sister, how to be a better person in the world. I can't imagine a world without Danny in it, but he is, isn't he? He is in each one of us whom he touched with his grace, love, kindness, integrity, wicked sense of humor, insistence on finding the best in each person. In his final days, he said the best thing in his life was getting to sit side by side with Dorothy and just look at the sky. How lucky that we all got to spend time with him during our short spin on the planet.
Here's a poem. Everything is beautiful, and I'm so sad. This is how the heart makes a duet of wonder and grief. The light spraying through the lace of the fern is as delicate as the fibers of memory forming their web around the knot in my throat. The breeze makes the birds move from branch to branch as this ache makes me look for those I've lost in the next room, in the next song, in the laugh of the next stranger. In the very center, under it all, what we have that no one can take away, and all that we've lost face each other. It's there that I'm adrift, feeling punctured by a holiness that exists inside everything. I am so sad, and everything is beautiful. I love Dan Wile. I just gotta say that first. I met Dan at a workshop in 1998. It was a workshop that he was doing with a guy named Bernie Applebaum, who was Dan's mentor. And I was there for, it was like a half-day workshop. And I didn't understand a thing Bernie Applebaum said. He, I think, was saying brilliant stuff, but I just did not get this guy. But sitting next to him was Dan. And Dan would quietly be listening, and then he would offer some comment, and I would think, oh, that guy knows something. I left that workshop, didn't connect with him personally, and was pretty absorbed in my own anxiety and worry about trying to be a therapist. But a year later, he turned up at our local camp meeting in Sonoma County and did a day-long presentation. And I had that feeling again, like, this guy knows something. He's on to something really important. So I did this thing I've never done before. I approached him after the workshop, and in my somewhat introverted way said, if I got a bunch of people together up in Sonoma County, would you have any interest in coming up and helping us out? And it was Dan, so he said, yeah, sure. So we started meeting at my office, and then at my house, and then at my office again. And we did that for about 21 years, I think. I was looking for help in how to do my job. And what I found was a mentor, and maybe even more importantly, a friend. So I'm just going to give you some highlights here. This is sort of the Reader's Digest version of Kevin's experience at Dan. During one of our monthly meetings, an early one, I was still getting to know Dan, and there was a group of therapists there, 6 or 8, and there was a person there who was actually not a therapist, but she wanted to learn something about couples and herself. And of course, Dan, A-okay with it. Well, the next meeting, one of the therapists that had been there earlier came back and just started chewing him out. You know, what an incompetent person he is, what a terrible therapist he is. She's gonna report him to the therapy police. And Dan's listening. He's listening. You think I did this wrong? How? Now I'm standing next to Dan the whole time, and I'm trying to send daggers through my eyes at this therapist. Dan was wide-eyed and welcoming, accepted her feedback. She never came back to the group. But that was Dan's stance with people, right? One of the really interesting things and cool things about Dan, too, is that over the years, unlike so many, hotshot therapists, theorists, writers, Dan was open to anything that was interesting to him. So when I was investigating another therapeutic approach called family constellation work, where you invite people to role play people in families, Dan said, well, can I come? I'd like to come. And he did. And I'll never forget him role playing. He was being an unborn child for a couple. And he was sitting on the floor with his legs crossed, beaming up, and just looked so innocent and happy. And I thought, my God, he's like a child. It was totally great. Also, Evie mentioned EFT, and at the EFT training with Sue Johnson, Dan was there and surprised Sue Johnson, because, you know, hotshot therapists they don't usually have the experience of having other hotshot therapists be at their workshops. But there was Dan, and we were sitting together in the front row, and Sue announced, Dan Wile is here, and said a number of really great things about him to the whole group. And, you know, it was Dan, so he was pleased and happy. And then after the workshop, I was fortunate enough to be sitting with Dan and got to hear Sue come over and in a very personal way express her admiration for him and her appreciation for him. And it was just this sort of gorgeous, gorgeous moment. As you can imagine, meeting for 21 years and spending time together every month, we became friends, and we helped each other out. A couple of guys helping each other out as his marriage changed, and he became a single guy, and my marriage changed, and I became a single guy, and you know, he would stick around after our monthly meeting, and he would talk about 15-minute dating. And, you know, I met this woman, and she had sort of these interesting parts to her, and this one here, she was crazy. I'm not going to have anything to do, you know. And you know, and I would do my sharing with him too. And it was just, again, this sort of lovely kind of Dan openness to the world. And I kept admiring him, like, really, you went on Match.com. You're a couples therapist on Match.com. Whereas I would slink to my office with shame and embarrassment. Yeah, I'm a couples therapist and I'm not married. Dan had no shame. He was just so himself. It's interesting what you were saying, Evie, because I made a note too. I a few times referred to Dan and said it to him directly. I said, you know, you're the reluctant Buddhist. You really, and he would always screw up his face and, you know, like, yeah, whatever. But I've never known a person. I've been a meditation practitioner and studying Buddhism for 30 years. And Dan is one of those people who didn't have to study it. He's living it. He just lives it. He's the most compassionate person I've ever met. And with his emphasis on kind of accepting the world as it is. Even as he would try to influence the world to change in some way, he would also accept, well, this is the world. And he was very, you know, a lot of us meditation people were trying to arrive in the present moment. And Dan was just in the present moment. He didn't have to practice it. That's how he lived his life. So just a couple of notes here about Dan being compassionate with other people and with himself. And in many ways, I'm kind of tagging on Evie's comments, but I think one of Dan's great contributions was to help us young therapists learn how to be compassionate with ourselves. We're tasked with helping people, and we're always afraid we're screwing up. And Dan was really good at, yeah, you're going to screw up. Okay, forgive yourself and keep going. Which was a really essential message for me to get. A couple of years before he died, I got to accompany Dan on a trip to South Carolina, where we were there, Dan and I and another therapist who's now going to embarrass myself, I can't remember. Rick. Yeah. Rick, where are you? Rick. So we were in South Carolina, and we were there to talk with military chaplains about how to help the chaplains talk with couples. And I grew up in a military family, so I had a lot of judgment about the military. And Dan presented his material in just the clearest way, clearly was not over there judging people. And it was just kind of beautiful to see him. And again, his kindness, his earnest efforts to help these guys that I'm trying to help too, but frankly, there's a part of my brain judging the hell out of everybody. So, but Rick was great too, by the way. And I think part of what happened in that training too was another version of Dan's basic stance. You know, way back when we were in that first consultation group together, and his attitude was, everybody is welcome here. If you're a therapist, great. If you're not a therapist, no problem. If you're here to try to understand yourself and other people, relationship, love, how to have good conversations, you're in. And I saw him very clearly demonstrating all of that at that workshop as well. The last time I saw Dan was a couple of weeks before he died, and went to his house and went downstairs to his study where he does his writing, and he was laying on the couch. There's a little couch there as soon as you get downstairs, and he was visibly tired, but he, you know, it was Dan. He sort of got up on one elbow and he had that relentless smile. You know, welcoming, good to see you. And he started talking about the next workshop that he wanted to do. And it was going to be a workshop, he was telling me, we're going to do a workshop here in my office, and it'll be you and me and Dorothy. And you know, he was saying, I'll present my theory and my ideas, and then and Dorothy will do her contribution, and Kevin, you can do some examples of doubling and stuff like that. Very enthusiastic. And then Dorothy came and sat down with us, and as he was talking, and I could see there was a moment where Dan sort of looked in Dorothy's face, and he could see something. I don't know if you remember this, but then he said, it's probably not going to happen, is it? And he looked at Dorothy, and he looked at me, and Dorothy said, probably not, probably not. And Dan got very still, and he was just looking at us. And he said, all right then. I got up to leave, and Dorothy had already left. I got up to leave, and Dan and I sort of smiled at each other, knowing this is the last time we're going to see each other. And it was just, again, this sort of gorgeous, beautiful moment. Dan was one of the most compassionate, exceptional human beings I've ever known. To me, he was a guy who knew his purpose. I don't know if he came out of the womb like that, but it just seemed like he knew who he was, he knew where he was going, he knew what his mission was, and he never varied from that. And in the doing of this, you know, he inspired us, he enlivened us, he gave us hope, he helped us see possibilities for clients, for ourselves. And even as he accepted, I think, the ending of his life, I don't think he wanted to go. I think he knew there was more work to do, more ways to help other people. He was just so committed to that. And now he's gone. And again, I'm echoing Evie a lot, but I see clients 5 days a week, couples mostly, and every day I can feel Dan with me. Every day I can hear his voice in my head. I'm trying to remember suggestions he made, or just an attitude, or reminding myself to try to bring some version of that same empathy and compassion that he seemed to just bring naturally to everybody. He had a number of great interventions, including his how much question was a big deal to him at the end. He talked about it a lot, you know, how much this, how much that. Left me with this how much question. How much do we make a real difference to other people? Or how much do we hope we're making a difference to other people? And in Dan's case, of course, he made a huge difference to everybody. Everybody he ever met. I've even come to think of Dan as sort of my own sort of private Mr. Rogers. You know, he's just had that same quality. So a little poem. Look, the trees are turning their own bodies into pillars of light. They're giving off the rich fragrance of cinnamon and fulfillment. The long tapers of cattails are bursting and floating away over the blue shoulders of ponds. And every pond, no matter what its name is nameless now. Every year, everything I've ever learned in my life leads back to this. The fires and the black river of loss, whose other side is salvation, whose meaning none of us will ever know. To live in this world, you must be able to do three things. To love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing your own life depends on it. And when the time comes to let it go, to let it go.